Another workshop is just about to begin back here. The Arab Spring and the need for reform. This is important. Let's go have a look.
Very important, but it's about the local. It really is about how do you engage on a local level. How do you find that disenfranchised communities and how do you work with them? One of the things that what's been happening over the last year was movement building and looking in to see why are people non-political, why are people making political statements yet saying, I don't hold a political view. One of the things that we noticed with the Khaled Said page is when we started talking in a very political tone, people disengaged. So we had to take them through that process. If here people don't know, Khaled Said was brutally beaten to death, and that's what instigated the page. And his picture was released onto the internet. So we started talking about the social aspects of this death. What does it mean? And engaging in that sphere, we had people come out on the Corniche and on the Alexandria boardwalk. And instead of having it a political ideology behind it, we talked about mourning the young man. And we thought of ways to not come up against the emergency law. So we asked no one to speak, stand 5 meters apart. And that sort of broke down the barrier of fear that you can make a statement in public. It doesn't have to be politicized. And so a lot of what happened was learning from what happened before. These are practices that have happened over years, and there are a lot of organizers like Saadettin who've been doing this and found it very difficult to be able to function in a public sphere. What the internet allowed us to do was find a public sphere that we could engage without having the government watch us, because they saw social media as something social. It is allowed. It's where you give your opinion and you don't really engage in political organizing. So I think this is what sort of what allowed for the tipping point for people to engage. So after Khaled Said, the parliamentary elections happened in Egypt, and I can only speak for Egypt, unfortunately. The parliamentary elections happened in Egypt, and people started to get politicized. They would take pictures of ballot boxes being stuffed. This is a political act in going and trying to see how the elections are being rigged. We have moved our constituency from a very non-political, a social mourning to a very political act. And then Tunisia happened, which was a wonderful thing, and it was sort of the fire that was lit to the kindling, but the kindling was there. And it didn't start with Khaled Said. It's been happening for many, many years. So it's sort of a serendipity that it was able to happen in Egypt. And one interesting fact that Dr. Baradei had come to Egypt. This is not something that I can say would have led necessarily to Egypt, but Tunisian youths, when they saw him in Dubai, said, thank you for coming and being courageous enough to stand up. So even then, the youth appreciate that this isn't just us. So to me, it's a moment in history where we were allowed to come together and be able to do something like this.
Every time that there was violence from the regime, instead of people like usual being intimidated and going away, we saw more. Not just in Egypt, in Tunisia, Yemen, a country that has 100 million pieces of weapon within the civilians, we didn't see a one shot being shot back. Actually, more people coming out. In Syria, everywhere, what happened? What happened to the youth that they're not scared anymore? They lost their fear. What happened?
You grew up 30 years, all you know is fear. I think this is something that we can attribute to a little bit of the internet, is that you begin to see a different paradigm. You begin to see people like I lived in the States, so when I'm talking to people and engaging with people on a local level, I'm not engaging just as an expat, I'm not engaging as living in the diaspora, but I'm working and talking and having these discussions, yes, through GChat and Skype, but literally about facts on the ground. You begin to see a paradigm where fear is not necessarily a central part of your life. I also think I mean, having not been on the ground, but hearing stories from the people on the ground, at the time, you sort of, it's like the tipping point. You start seeing, well, if he's not afraid, then maybe I shouldn't be afraid. So, for example, I know that the January 25th, they used organizing tools where they go from poor neighborhood to poor neighborhood, where the government didn't really have an eye on those. And they would chant and getting as many people to come together. And when they felt that they had a large enough number that their safety was not ensured, but at least raised. So then they would move and congregate in more public spheres, public spaces. So this was part of the organizing, this was part of building that momentum, but it's literally standing together. And you have, one of the things that you hear a lot is we're 82 million and Rwanda is one. I think if we stood 1 for 1, we would win. That was the feeling that you had, that no, they have to come down. There are a few up there, and we are much more. And if we do really come together and build unity. And so you see the Ikhwan youth coming together with, ideology made no difference. The Ittilaf is cross-ideological, and we're trying to continue building that coalition, and we're trying to continue building coalitions like that. But they're bound to fall apart because our one goal is no longer there. So ideologies will start coming out. But I think that that's the important thing, is coming together.
I hope we get a chance to talk about now the different ideologies in the next session and what do we do next. Karina.
Thank you, Abdul.